Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. When a major piece of tax legislation drops, it's so easy to get lost in all the noise and the rumors floating around. But today, we're cutting through all that to look directly at the actual text of the newly proposed Finance Bill 2026. We want to see the precise mechanisms the government is proposing, and what we found regarding mobile connectivity is genuinely fascinating.
Here is the game plan for today. First, we are covering the mobile phone tax hike. Second, a really interesting twist on the activation rules. And third, a major exemption for a local assembly.
All right, Section 1, the mobile phone tax hike.
So just to give us some context, let's look at where things stand right now. If you check out the existing rules in the first schedule, the baseline excise duty for imported cellular phones is sitting at 10%. It's explicitly listed right there in the table. This 10% has basically been the established benchmark for devices entering the country for a while now. But, and this is a huge but, the Finance Bill 2026 is proposing a massive jump. They are looking to push that duty all the way up to 25%. I mean, that is a highly significant leap, especially when we're talking about the baseline cost of a fundamental tool. Millions of people rely on these devices for literally everything, from running a small business to accessing their education. And we can verify this by looking right at the proposed text. The new description specifically calls out telephones for cellular networks and other wireless networks, and right next to it, boom, it's explicitly assigned this brand new 25% rate. So it's not a rumor, it is literally right there in the legislative text, confirming a major shift in how these devices will be assessed. So what does this actually mean for us? Well, it is a 15% overnight jump in the base tax, going from a 10% baselines up to 25%. That isn't just some minor tweak to the system. It is a complete reevaluation of how imported cellular hardware is treated under the excise duty framework. Moving on to Section 2, the activation rule twist. Now here's where things get kind of wild. The rate hike isn't the only major change in this document. If we look under Part 4, dealing with excise duty, Section 34 introduces this genuinely fascinating twist about exactly when an importer or manufacturer becomes liable for this tax. Usually, you'd think an import tax triggers at the border, right? Or maybe when the goods hit the distributor. But this legislation proposes an entirely different approach. The legal text explicitly says that the liability for this tax arises precisely at the time the phone is activated. Think about that for a second. It's almost like the taxman is waiting right there inside the power button. It completely shifts the taxable event from a logistical milestone, like sitting on a store shelf, to a functional milestone. And the text on the following page doubles down on this mechanic, zeroing in on strict enforcement. It mandates that the duty has to be paid to the commissioner by the time of the phone's activation. It's a highly specific, really targeted mechanism. They want to ensure that the exact moment a device comes alive on a network, that 25% duty is fully accounted for. So, breaking this down into the real world. Step 1, the phone is brought into the country, but the liability doesn't trigger when it hits the shelf. Step 2 happens at the exact moment a user powers it on and tries to connect to a cellular network. That physical, real-world action, that is Step 3, the ultimate trigger for the tax liability. Honestly, it's a very modern, digitally aware way to write tax legislation. All right, on to Section 3, the local assembly exemption. Now, with a steep 25% tax hitting the second a phone is activated, you are probably wondering, are there any exceptions to this? Well, if we flip over to the second schedule of the bill, which deals with zero rating, we actually find a super important list of exempt supplies. In tax law, zero rating essentially means the government is intentionally deciding a good or service should carry a tax rate of 0%, usually to stimulate that specific sector. It's honestly kind of a surprising list. You've got things like the transportation of sugarcane to milling factories, motorcycles, electric bicycles, but nestled right in there at item 29, the bill specifically highlights a crucial piece of tech. It lists the supply of locally assembled and manufactured mobile phones as entirely zero rated. And just to be absolutely clear, zero rated means a 0% tax liability. That is a massive distinction. It means locally built devices completely bypass that steep 25% activation tax. If it's put together locally, the legislation basically gives it a free pass from this specific excise duty. So what this does is establish a huge embedded financial advantage. You've got imported phones getting hit with a heavy 25% tax the exact second they are activated, while locally assembled phones get off completely scot-free. It's a stark, very intentional contrast in the rules. Which leaves us with a million-dollar question. Will this unique activation tax actually pivot the entire consumer market toward local assembly, or is it just going to create a massive barrier to entry? Because we really have to consider the broader socioeconomic impact here. If imported phones suddenly become 15% more expensive overnight, how does that affect a student who relies on a smartphone for their education? Or what about digital inclusion and everyday access to mobile money services, like M-Pesa, which, let's face it, pretty much run the daily economy? The bill clearly aims to protect local manufacturing, but you have to wonder if the cost of that protection is going to be paid by everyday digital inclusion. So, what do you think? Is the local assembly exemption enough to offset the cost? Keep diving into the sources, and as always, stay curious.